listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up? Rob Lane here with a brand new episode of the Straight to Video podcast. And guess what? This is episode 40. We've hit another milestone. I'm probably going to be doing that every 10 episodes or so until we hit 100, because it's a massive deal for me with this fun project we've all got going on. Today, to mark the occasion, I've got a great chat coming up with CJ Wildheart. I had a lot of fun speaking to CJ, who, along with the rest of the Wildhearts, are without a doubt a great British hard rock institution. Still going strong with zero signs of slowing down and still churning out such powerful, heavy and in-your-face tunes, the same as when they first burst onto the music scene in the early 1990s. CJ was on top form, and despite everything that's been going on in the world, he's managed to channel his creative energies into a brand new mini album called Siege and a brand new face-melting single called The State of Us. The single is out now and the album is released December the 11th, and you can pre-order from cjwildheart.bigcartel.com, where he has some really cool packages available. So head on over, check it all out, or simply find him online in all the usual social media places at simply CJ Wildheart. It was great to dive back and have CJ share some of his early adventures from growing up on military bases, his first rock shows as a fan before returning to the UK and starting his home bands, and relocating to London, where he would dip his toes into the glam rock world of the time in the Tattooed Love Boys before meeting Ginger Wildheart and then both becoming the band we all know today. Along the way, we touch on some honey crack history and their place in music and the classic show TFI Friday during the 90s, so it's a lot of fun to hear all CJ's cool stories. Be sure to check out and turn up loud the new single, The State of Us, but first, enjoy my chat with the awesome CJ Wildheart.
I don't know what's going on with those Chinese people at the moment, but I love this phone, and it's only lasted about 16 months. A great, best camera phone I've ever had.
Yeah,
the camera's great, but the rest of it's absolute shit. I think my phone's got coronavirus.
If it's cool with you, Matt, I'd love to talk a little bit about your growing up and early footsteps into the music world, if that's all right, to dive back.
Yes.
If I'm right, you were born in Colchester, but you kind of moved around a lot because both your parents were in the British Army, is that right?
I was born in Colchester Military Hospital, and then my brother arrived like a year later, and then we moved to Folkestone, and then we moved to Malaya in Singapore, then came back to Britain for a little while, then we moved to Germany for 7 years, and then I came back to Britain when I was 15.
Yeah. How was that for you? Do you have many memories?
Yeah, tons. I mean, my first ever memories as a person are living in Singapore. So, you know, it was the Pacific, Changi, Tiger Balm Gardens, you know, palm trees. I have a thing about Buddhas, especially the big fat laughing Buddhas, which there's one in Tiger Balm Gardens. And I've always had a connection to, like, you know, Asia, especially the Far East. And, you know, I ended up living in Japan for Tokyo for many years. And
really?
I've always felt a connection there. But I think there's a lot of it's got to do with when I first became aware of my surroundings as a person. I was living in Singapore. So I moved around a lot. I went to probably about 8 schools. So 6 schools, 3 high schools. So, because of me moving around and growing up in 4 different countries, I was very unsettled. When my dad eventually left the army and I went to my first ever civilian school, it was hell for me, and luckily enough, I was only there for a year. I was so used to being on army bases and going to army schools. Yeah. It was a real education coming to Britain when I was 15 and coming across like skinheads and the whole NF thing and being in the army, it's different. I wasn't exposed to that kind of life. And I went to school with all our mums and dads were soldiers. Yeah. So, and then all of a sudden I'm going to school with like, plumbers and people who taxi drivers.
Was it like families moving around at the same time as you, or so you was able to make friends and stuff like that? Or?
You'd make friends and lose them basically. You're moving all the time. So my dad would get posted, to a different, we moved a couple of times in Germany. We were offered posts, we could have moved to Hong Kong for a year, but they thought it would be really unsettling. We were supposed to move to Cyprus in 76 and the war broke out. So we didn't go there, and it's really unsettling. But my dad was in the army for 25 years. So to me, this traveling around and having to move on and stuff, it was just a way of life. So I knew no different. So it wasn't until, I went to a civilian school that I realized kids didn't see tanks every day and see helicopters landing in their playing fields, and their dads didn't have guns, and, they didn't have, armed guards.
Mm-hmm. Unreal, man.
So it was, I just thought that was normal, but it wasn't.
I read a story somewhere about injecting stuff into fruit. Is that a true story?
Oh, pee? Yeah. My dad was a medic, and my mum was in the army as well. She was a nurse in the army, but back in the 60s, I'm sure the rules had changed now, but back then nurses weren't allowed to be married. So when my dad and mum met and got married, my mum had to leave the army. Wow. So my dad was a medic, so we lived on British military hospitals, and hence, and then I lived in a place called BMH Rintown. Anyone who grew up in the army knows you have an officers' mess where the officers and their families and that go to hang out. Then you have a sergeant's mess, and then there's my dad was a sergeant, a staff sergeant, so we had our own little area. But there's some plums in the officers' kind of section, the officers' hood, and we were picking them, and someone told us off and said we shouldn't be there, and it was like, whatever. Well, we knew where like all the hypodermics were dumped and stuff, so me and my mates went and got some, and we peed in them and started injecting the plums with our fists, and then a few hours later we sat back and watched people eating these plums. Oh, they're so juicy.
Was it actually your idea or one of your mates' ideas?
No, I was a bad kid. We were all bad. Yeah, we used to hunt each other with like air rifles and stuff. And no, we were bad. Yeah. We shot a couple of teachers. I remember that.
That's some early rock and roll adventures. That is right there.
I did some of the things we used to. I mean, we were bad. We were bad kids, but in a way that we didn't really hurt anyone. You just got shot with a pellet. Okay. There was that one incident that teacher died, but so what? We never talk about that. Yeah. It's all right. He only burnt his face, and they reconstructed it, and he was all right in the end. He went on to carry on teaching geography. Yeah.
So how did your brother cope with all the moving around? Did he cope with it in a similar way to you?
Yeah, he did. But my brother got very sick. He had kidney failure like when he was very young. And so he was quite sick. So I remember he actually went to Great Ormond Street. But I mean, he coped with it as well. I mean, but I think I was at an age when we came back to the UK. I had another year at school and exams were coming up, and I dropped out basically. I just couldn't handle, the school I was in and the surroundings. And to be honest with you, I just wanted to be in a band and tour. And I'd already made my mind up that's what I was going to do. So it doesn't matter what the teachers were telling me and you're dreaming. And I remember career advisor saying, well, what makes you think you're going to be in a band? And I went, because I don't look like you. He goes, you've really got a really bad attitude. And I go, exactly.
Perfect. I'm custom made for it.
It was the best thing coming back to Britain at that age, because it gave me just, when you get that bit between your teeth and it's just like, I know what I'm going to do. Get out of this town. No offense. It was Clacton-on-Sea. I loved the place. I've got some great friends down there, but I was only there for a few years. And I moved to London. London was up the road, and, moved to London, hung out in the West End for years in the 80s, and eventually ended ended up moving
Yeah.
to the West End and lived there for many, many years and hung out with pimps, prostitutes, hoes, you know, rockers, punks, goths, and it was great.
With you moving all around as a kid and stuff, was you kind of picking up different styles of music, or was like rock and roll or punk rock or anything that kind of grabbing you?
The first show I went to, I was 12. My dad took me to see Kiss on the Unmasked tour in Hanover, in Germany. And Iron Maiden was supporting as well, opening up. They were on the Maiden tour, 1980. And, you know, seeing that was amazing. You know, I've always loved punk. I've always loved metal. I mean, one of the things which helps me and Ginger, one of the things which bonded me and Ginger is our love of different types of guitar music and harmonies. And, you know, so it's a distinctive sound with the band, the Wildhearts. We could be punk once and then we can turn on the metal and then we can pull it into rock and roll, and it's all in the same song. And it's because we loved all those different types of music. And so my favorite guitar player is Angus Young. I love Angus Young. I mean, I love his style. You know, I'm not a shredder. You know, I've never been into that. I toyed with it for a few years, but I loved rock. I loved punk, and, you know, I loved the Police as well. They were huge in Germany. It's like bands like Kiss were massive in Germany. I know they weren't very big in the UK. So, you know, I mean, Kiss were a massive deal over in the 80s in Germany. So you couldn't escape them. They were everywhere.
I mean, that's life change. Just Kiss as your first concert.
I mean, Peter Criss had just left. So it was Eric Carr on drums. But, you know, it was Kiss. Yeah, it was like, I mean, I remember saying to my dad, it goes, that is what I want to do. And I was 12, you know, and he was like, well, you'll do it.
How did you end up going to the concert anyway? Is your dad a music fan as well, or had you seen pictures of Kiss or knew the music?
Yeah, we got into Kiss through friends, and military like bases. You have a lot of like Americans as well as British kids. So we had like I remember American kid, Mark, his name was. He gave me and my brother Kiss and Mars on cassette, and that was it. You know, we just kind of got into the band, and then we said to my dad we wanted to go and see Kiss. He says, "Oh no, I'll sort it out." But my dad plays; he's a guitarist, and both my uncles, my dad's uncles, they're musicians as well, and all my dad's family all sing. My grandfather was a Lutheran minister, so, you know, he's a pastor. He had his own church. He was the head of the Lutheran church in British Guyana. So they're all singing, they're all gospel-y, and they're all musicians. So I come from that kind of background. So it's in the blood.
Yeah, definitely. So was it your dad's guitar the first one you started to learn on?
I found a guitar in the basement of the block of flats we lived in Germany, acoustic, and I took it up, and I didn't actually know my dad could play, and he picked it up and tuned it and started playing. And I was like, oh wow, I was really like jealous. I went, right, I'm going to learn. And I think I was about 10 or 11. And then I started learning. And then I asked him if I remember my dad saying, I said, oh, can I get some lessons? And he went, oh, no, he bought me a teach yourself guitar book. And he goes, no, teach yourself, because if you get lessons, you're just going to play like a teacher. You'll have your own style.
Fair enough.
If you teach yourself. Yeah. And really good advice. Yeah. That's why I play like a retard.
So who was you modelling yourself on? Was it like Angus Young? Was he the first guy like, right, what's he doing?
I always liked songs. So that's why I didn't really get into the shreddy thing. Mm-hmm. So when people used to kind of go off and do the lead thing, it always what I loved was songs and riffs, and so I always like singers, but I always like I don't know what it is. You know, singers, they sing really high. Robert Plant and Ozzy, and it just doesn't do it for me.
No,
you know, it's just like. I like kind of soul-y singers, and I like singers that sound like they smoke a lot and drink a lot of whiskey. And
right. I
was always trying to find my voice, and which took decades and decades to find. You know, I think I've only just found it, like probably about a couple of hours ago. I found it on the floor. But it's guitarist. I always liked songs. And then riffs. When Metallica came on, so I got into Metallica very early on, before they had albums or anything, from a demo I heard. And hearing riffs, and then it changed a lot when the thrash thing hit. Hearing the riffs, and then I toyed with the glam thing for a bit, but it was always guitar based, Yeah. But then I got into hip hop as well, because the hip hop drum beat is my favorite drum beat. So I think if you're a musician, you kind of got to take everything in, haven't you? You can't just be.
Yeah, you can't be too tunneled, or it's just.
No. You meet a lot of like very tunnel vision fans. You understand that, where they're only into one type of. Mm-hmm. But if you're a musician, you got to appreciate all types of music, and it doesn't matter how it's put down. There's only two instruments I have to turn off if they come on the radio, and that's, believe it or not, bagpipes. I can't listen to; they're just annoying, and classical guitar.
Really? Wow!
I have to turn the radio off straight away. It makes me want to kill people for some reason. I hate it. That the picky classical guitar, like God, I can't stand it. It's just one of my least favorite sounds, and I have no idea why. Previous life, I maybe was taunted by some, wandering minstrel with his little classical guitar. Who knows? But I don't like it. It just doesn't appeal to me. Yeah, that and bagpipes. Yeah.
So where was the first kind of steps into forming or joining a band?
Very first time I tried to form a band, I was probably about, it's after I saw Kiss probably, or AC/DC, I can't remember. The next band I saw after Kiss was AC/DC on the Back and Black tour, about a month after that. So I think I wanted to form a band. So me and a bunch of kids tried to play, and then we realized that, we had a long way to go. But my first proper band, I was 16, and it was a metal band called Medusa. We had tinges of Metallica,
right,
and a bit of Anthrax as well. But we did our first gig at Clacton Town Hall. I was actually the Clacton Princess Theatre, and we had homemade pyro, and we set fire to ourselves on the stage and got kicked out.
First gig?
Yeah. I remember my feet being on fire going, this isn't how Kiss did it.
So no rehearsal or anything like that. Let's just light ourselves up.
Yeah, I mean, health and safety was a bit different then back in the 80s. Yeah. So yeah, we kind of got away with it. We actually used, fuse wire in dustbin lids and filled it up with flash powder, and a bit too much.
So good.
Got told I'll never play in Clacton on Sea ever again. And you know what? I never did.
Never did. So how long after that did the move to London come about?
Oh, I started hanging out in London by the time I was 17, 18, and I was in London, late teens. I'd moved to London. So yeah, it wasn't long.
Yeah.
I was out of Clacton after about 4 years. I was gone.
Was London just suddenly this holy shit, this is everything?
I joined a band and we were playing in London, kind of glam rock and roll band, Tattooed Love Boys.
Yes.
And I signed a record deal when I was 18.
How did you find out about them? Was it just an audition process, or
No,
did you know any of the
the
guys?
drummer, we were looking for a drummer. I was trying to put a band together, and a drummer came down, met me, and said, I saw the rest of the band and said, they're rubbish. I'm going to take you. We'll form a band. And he played in a what was it called? New wave of British heavy metal band called Praying Mantis. And he was a drummer in them. And he was a lot older than me, probably about 10, 12 years older than me. But, and I was like 17, 18. And he said, look, you need to get rid of those guys. And then they took me under their wing. We formed a band and, signed a record deal.
What kind of bands was you listening to at that point? Was you into because when is that kind of 87-ish time, 86, 87?
Yeah, I was really starting to get into American punk bands like the Descendants and stuff like that, and Black Flag. I mean, I'm a big Descendants fan. They're probably my favorite without a doubt, my favorite American punk band. But I started getting into them, and then the Metallica thing was massive as well. I mean, the whole thrash thing. I was into punk, into thrash, into glam.
Quite a contrast to the Tattooed Love Boys stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was with them for one album, but then I met Ginge, and
yeah,
me and Ginge. Ray Zell introduced me to Ginger.
Oh wow, right.
Ginger had been sacked from the Choir Boys, and he was looking to form a band. And Ray said, I know this guitarist. And I was playing at the Hippodrome, and he brought Ginger along. And we found out we loved Kiss, we loved Metallica, loved the Clash, loved like anything like Slayer and stuff. It was a really we had that same love the Cardiacs, and said, let's start a band. And we just kind of clicked, and it was really refreshing meeting a fellow musician who had the same eclectic sort of taste in guitar music.
Yeah,
kind of wanted to do something really heavy but melodic at the same time.
That's what always careballed me about the Wildhearts, because I was into the really pop metal commercial stuff of the late 80s, early 90s. So when it came to the Wildhearts, I like all the melodic stuff, but then they proper careballed me when they get heavy. It was that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can turn it on.
Yeah.
It's what I like about the band, That's what I like about the Wildhearts, because if we had just one sort of style, we've been together, over 31 years now.
Yeah.
We just played just the one style. I think it would be getting pretty boring now. And
yeah,
it's great. We can play a song like Everlone, and it's got 3 or 4 different twists and turns and different styles in there, and it's great. It's it's like a whole concert in 4 minutes. It's brilliant.
So just to rewind just a little bit, so when you was doing the Tattooed Love Boys, was you kind of focusing around London, or did you kind of get outside? Did you get any support slots or anything like that?
We were touring all over the UK, so it was the first time I ever really toured. And I mean, we used to headline the Marquee and stuff.
Yeah. Was it kind of everything you hoped it would be?
Yeah, I mean, I was always, you know what happened? It was like I played with the whole glam sleaze thing for a few years, but I stopped liking it.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really sing to me. And so I was very frustrated. And it was fun at first, but I became very frustrated in that band. And you know, I loved the guys and everything.
Yeah.
But, you know, you kind of know you're going to move on. And, you know, when I met Ginge and, you know, when we eventually said, yes, we're going to form a band together, it was a no-brainer. I moved on. But my time with the Taylor Boys was brilliant. I mean, I was 18 years old. I'm touring around the UK, you know, 18, 19, we're headlining the Marquee, you know, and stuff. These were legendary, you know, Marquee was a legendary venue back then. To be a teenager and play there was you know, it was great.
Everybody probably had a poster on the wall of a live shot of a band with the Marquee backdrop
we were in all the magazines as well, you know. It was the first time I was in Kerrang, and, you know, first time I ever had a record out. You know, the record came out in the UK and Europe and America, and it was great to be a teenager and, you know, have a record out. You know, those days were brilliant, and if I hadn't have been in that band, I would never have, you know, I wouldn't be talking to you today.
It was like the perfect time as well, like late 80s and stuff like that. It was never going to get any bigger, especially in the UK at least. Yeah,
I mean, I tell you what, I mean, there was a lot more gigs back then. I mean, we used to make a decent living from playing the circuit. There used to be a circuit around all the universities and colleges. It was a society, the Rock Society, and it was a healthy circuit, and you got paid well. A hell of a lot more money than bands get paid, you know, now. I know what support bands and bands playing in clubs get, and it's nothing. We get good money, and we had an agent as well, you know. They'll be booking these glam rock, punk bands, sleazy bands, and on this whole circuit. It was healthy. People would turn up, and the bands would get paid well.
Was there any kind of American touring bands coming over which you was able to latch onto?
We used to play with a lot of British bands like Tiger Tails and Wolfsbane. We were always playing with. You know, such a long time ago. I'm trying to think who should we play. We played with the Choir Boys.
So had you and Ginger crossed paths then, if you'd done the odd gig with the Choir Boys? So you kind of the odd nod to each other and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'd see each other in passing. I mean, we moved in the same circles, you know. And I mean, the bands who really kind of broke through from that scene were like Wolfsbane, you know, they signed to Def Jam, and then the Dogs D'Amour and the Choir Boys all signed deals, and you know, they were kind of exploding around the Wildhearts forming. When the Wildhearts finally came out, we were trying to find singers, and when we finally, Ginger started singing, I did the harmony thing with him, and we signed our deal. When the first tour we did was at Diamond Head, and then it was a tiny little club tour, but the first big tour we did was at Wolfsbane. We were a different type of sound, a different band.
Kind of like an added bonus for you. Say when you and Ginger decided to start the band, it was so refreshing for the both of you just to get away from, like you say, the hard rock stuff had become, I guess it was very formulated and stuff like that. So you starting this band with Ginger and it's pretty much anything goes. But then like a later bonus is you were trying to find a singer, but then, let's get Ginger to sing and my vocals work as harmonies. That's kind of another exciting thing to add on later on down the line. So that must have been extra cool, really.
Yeah, I mean, there was no one really like us. I mean, it was one of the reasons why we stood out. There was an element to the band and the makeup of the individuals in the band, which just made us kind of look a bit different. Although in the early days, we did look a lot like Guns N' Roses. I did look like Slash and Ginger with his ginger hair and everything. And I you know, when we used to be touring, people would, you guys Guns N' Roses? Nah, I'm about a foot taller than Slash.
So it's probably kind of hard to condense, but how has the band's working relationship changed since those early days? Do you still have some intense creative moments where you feel that buzz from when you first started?
We've fallen in and out of love so many times in this band. I mean, me and Ginger have fallen, you know, I mean, I was fired from the band for a while, but I mean, we get on great now, and you know, we've always had that respect for each other, and we also know that our guitars and our vocals are an integral part of the sound, massive part of the Wildheart sound, and we don't sit down and write. We all write our songs and then come together in rehearsals and bish bash bosh. You know, that sounds like bish bash bosh sounds like something Boris Johnson would say.
It does actually.
Bish bash bosh, yeah. Whatever that fucking means, Bojo. Yeah, I will do it. Yeah, we'd knocked the shit out of our songs, and Renaissance Men, which came out last year, I think it was last year. That was our first album in 10 years, and it took us by surprise. And when you surprise yourself, that means you're doing all right.
So you're doing like you're doing everything now in your kind of solo stuff. When you first left the Wildhearts and went on to Honeycrack, was there any kind of consideration for you to take the frontman role then?
I wasn't ready to be a frontman. Willie was like a part-time member of the Wildhearts, and when it became apparent that I was no longer going to be in the Wildhearts, Willie said, "Well, do you want to do some demos?" And we did some demos. And Willie was a much more advanced songwriter and musician than I was. Ugly, but much more advanced. He knows I jest. He was a very, very good-looking, handsome young lady, Willie. And, he approached me and we said, we'll do some demos. And we recorded 4 songs together. But he was a driving force there. But,
right.
Yeah, we had quite a few record deals on the table within a month. But then we had all sorts of, Warner Brothers wouldn't release me from the contract. And we had all sorts of stuff going on. And we ended up with Sony and we ended up making an album together. But what I learned in a couple of years working with someone like Willie, who's just he's a complete studio head songwriter. He's, whereas the Wildhearts was like, I love touring with the Wildhearts. I love getting high and just being bad. It was brilliant, But with Honeycrack, it was I learned how to sing harmonies properly. I learned so much about recording music and the process of capturing sound. It's the reason why I can record my own albums now. And if I hadn't come out of the Wildhearts and then put together with Willie and it taught me so much. And that experience, that learning process is invaluable. Money couldn't have paid for it. And in those 2 years, my eyes were open. But it also, I will never sound like the Beatles ever again. They put me off the Beatles for life. Willie's like a Beatophile, man. He's so into the Beatles. And it's where we started partying because I missed being heavy, like really heavy. Yeah. And I wanted to be more punk and he wanted to be more delicious and beautiful with the harmonies and stuff, And it was just, yeah. He wanted to smoke weed. I wanted to smoke crack.
He wanted to be Fountains of Wayne and you wanted to be Slayer.
Yeah, and Fountains of Wayne. Yeah, we kind of grew up. But yeah, those 2 years were just wonderful. Yeah, I learned so much off the guy.
I saw you guys supporting Alanis Morissette in Manchester.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, Taylor Hawkins was drumming.
That was such a good band she had back then, mate. A proper rock and roll band, really.
He was great, Taylor, because our drummer, Hugo, he had to be checked into the Priory because he had a mental health episode, believed he was James Bond. So we need to put him into the Priory, yeah. And that was like 2 days before we went on tour, supporting her on the Jagged Little Pill tour, the UK and Europe. It's a big deal, and it's a big album. So we had to get a session player in. So we got a girl player, Kate, who was a friend of Willie's. She just came in and learned the set in a day and did it. But Taylor and Alance were big Honeycrack fans, and Taylor loved the album, so he'd get up and do sound checks with us and stuff. Yeah, he was brilliant. Yeah, but I think he got the call from Dave Grohl on that tour.
I can remember we saw him because that album, as you say, that album was frigging massive. That Jagged Little Pill album. And I think we saw her on the Manchester Student Union was the first time we saw her. So it's only like, I don't know how many that holds, maybe 1,000 people or something like that. And straight away, it's like that drummer, he's a star. You could tell. It
was such a great tour. But Honeycrack tour was some really, we supported Weezer on their first album, the Blue Album. I'm a massive Weezer fan. And we did, tour with Skunk and Nancy, and we toured with the Muffs as well. So we toured with some really cool bands.
Anything goes during music during that kind of, I call it like the TFI Friday days where music was so varied. Yes. You never know what was going to come out.
It was a really healthy time for British music. But saying that, I was driving up from Brighton today with my girlfriend, and she wanted to listen to what's on the digital stage and only plays 80s music. There's one that only plays 80s music and there's one that only plays 90s.
Oh, Absolute.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So we were listening to the 80s thing, and it was that's my, I was a kid, and an adult. We thought, let's try the 90s thing on. But I had to stop listening to that Brit Pop shit, man. It's like, no offense, man, but it's like a limp piece of lettuce. It's so floppy and it's just so nice, and it's does my head in. And I was part of that as well. But I was never really into the Brit Pop thing. It was just it just didn't have enough balls about it. It was like a limp handshake.
So speaking of TFI Friday, how was your TFI Friday experience? Do you remember much of it?
Actually, Chris Evans made Honeycrack had a single called Go Away, and it was his when he was doing the breakfast show at Radio 1. It was his single of the week for 2 weeks running, and then he asked us if we'd do the pilot for TFI. So we actually filmed the pilot. I think it was us. I think M people were on there, and maybe Menswear. One of those fans who are like lettuce. Yeah. And no offense, don't hate me. That Menswear fan's going to come after me, wherever he or she is. But so we did the pilot, and then obviously he got us back on to do the main show. It was great. Back then it was filmed live, and they just got you wrecked, that bar and everything. But saying that, Chris Evans, I've never seen anyone just, man, the guy's like a dragon. Just, he's fierce. Yeah. He knows what he wants. He knows how to get it. Yeah.
He was like one of the biggest stars on TV back then, man. That's probably
He was. Thursdays are fun, you know. We used to get a lot of respect, and yeah, I don't look back at them and go, oh, shit. I had a lot of fun.
With the Wildhearts, do you guys give each other feedback on your own solo projects?
Oh, we stand in a circle and pat each other on the back constantly. I got a lovely message off Ginger. I sent him my latest album, and he goes, yes, that anger's real. You can tell it's not put on. And he goes, it's going to make the next Wildheart album sound like a bunch of ballads. So it's such a lovely compliment from Ginger, and Richie complimented me, and I've had so much love for the single, and it's really taken me by surprise, because my latest album is like a lockdown album, and I wrote it during lockdown, and I've had it's been a horrible year, like it's been for everyone, but there's, you know, I've been through a lot this year, and especially with my parents and being very ill. And just because we were locked down, we could observe the way people were behaving and reacting in the world to certain situations. And then I don't think I've ever felt so ashamed to be part of the human race. As you know, obviously, you know, the human race has done things which much worse, but you know, I wasn't alive. I'm alive during this time.
Yeah. And we're kind of in a time now where it's not necessary for it to happen. There's too many luxuries.
There's arseholes buying like toilet paper and stuff. I mean, what is wrong with people? And then, I mean, then it just escalated. People went nuts. All the riots and looting, and it's just like, oh. So that combined with personal stuff going on with my folks. So I didn't see my girlfriend for 3 months, you know, trying to become a teacher to my son, everything being cancelled for the band. You know, it was, you know, we had a good year last year, and Domino's was stacking up and about to tour and do all these big festivals and go to South America for the first time. And it just went...
Yeah.
And it's just like I'm sat at home going, I need to channel. I'm in lockdown, so I can't go out on the streets and start, you know, killing people. So I channeled that anger into music, and hence me having this quite intense, heavy album. But it's great. It's the best place to channel that kind of raw. And it's been really therapeutic.
So like you say, you're releasing a new album, which is not only a tough time for the music industry, but also a tough time in general with everything that's going off. But it must feel kind of good knowing there's a fan base as loyal as the Wildhearts out there who is always excited to hear new music for you guys. So that's got to be a bit of a bonus. The
Wildheart fans are like, you know, it's not the biggest army in the world, but the fans we have are so loyal. You know, they've followed the band for a long time, but they're pulling in younger people. They're pulling in members of their family, and they're not going away. And it's just like, I mean, I can't, as long as, you know, we're living and breathing, I can see us carrying on making music as the band, the Wildhearts, and as solo artists as well. And I mean, they've kept us afloat as well, because we couldn't be furloughed. We have really good management, and, you know, they set up a really good business model around the band. So, you know, we've survived on wages, but, you know, we had to cut down our wages to make them last longer. But the fans have been buying our merch, and they're keeping us afloat. You know, we haven't been furloughed. We haven't taken any money from the government. And you know, we're surviving on our own steam, and we're surviving because of how loyal and wonderful our fans are. I'm about to go bankrupt. Go out and buy my album now. Buy 2 copies or 3 if you can afford it. Yeah.
So as a kid, do you think you were ever that passionate about a band?
Oh, yeah.
You'd do anything for them?
I mean, I was a huge Kiss fan. Kind of once the makeup came off, yeah, it kind of stopped there. And I tell you, the band made me want to be a serious musician was the Police.
Yeah?
Yeah, even to this day, Stuart Copeland is my favourite drummer.
His stuff's insane. It's like, I mean, they were a pop band. They were like mainstream, but then when you listen to the stuff, it's like, holy shit.
Yes, and they had an edge about them. I mean, it's that punk rock thing. I mean, Copeland drums like a punk rock drummer, but he's got rudiments, he's got things down, and he plays authentic style as well, which was, I've never seen anyone play like that before. And you know what? Ultimately, it always comes back to punk. Whether it doesn't matter if you don't look punk or you don't sound punk. It's an attitude. It's an approach to music, and I think Ginger's the same as well. You always come back. If someone asked me what I was, I'd always say, yeah, I'm a punk. I might not have a mohawk, but it's the attitude.
Nice one, dude. CJ, thank you ever so much for that. I've loved chatting with you.
Brilliant. Take care, man.
Thanks to CJ Wildheart for taking the time to talk to me on the Straight to Video podcast and getting episode 40 in the bag. Be sure to find CJ all over social media right now at CJ Wildheart, as he's busy melting faces with his new album Siege and continues to also melt mouths with his brand of Devil Spit hot sauce, which is flying off the shelves. Thanks also to you guys for being on this ride with me. Got a long way to go yet, but so glad you're all enjoying the chats and continuing to listen. Please keep in touch on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram whenever you can, and a review on Apple Podcasts if you listen there would be amazing, and it all helps more than you know. So until next time, look after yourselves and I'll speak to you all real soon.